Now, ladies and gentlemen, you are at a point where you understand how to create and generate text subtitles. You now understand how to create and make really, really cool text styles and save them as text styles. You understand how to make basic text styles, special text styles, and multiple text styles that you can use in your text in Premiere Pro. It's finally time to spice up our text with some text animations. And the way that we're going to be doing this is by saving them as presets and then applying them to our text. So with this being said, let us dive right in. So text animations, there's a few things you need to know. It depends a lot on the style that you're going with. So if you're going with something that is more entertaining, so if you're going with an entertaining video like a Mr. Beast video, you want those flashy scale in text animations. But if you're going with something simple and minimalistic, you want to go with the pop out, like these pop up simple fade in animations. And we're going to be creating both of them in today's episode. So with this being said, let's get straight into it. It depends on which one you want to use, by the way. So let's check this out. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate this entire scene over here with the text over to this side, just so I can show you guys what these look like. And I'm just going to add both of these like this right next to each other. One of these is going to be the pop out textile, and the second one is going to be the the scale up textile. Second one's going to be the pop up textile, and you guys will see what these are in just a bit. To do this, we're going to be using our transform effect so that we can once again save it as a preset, just like we did with our zoom in. And also we're going to need to worry about something called an anchor point. So let me quickly just break down what an anchor point is for you guys. So an anchor point, when you select your text, right? Let's say you click on your vector motion, you see this kind of dot over here in the middle, this weird shape. And the weird thing is when you scale it, it doesn't seem to scale from the center of the text, it scales from the center of this dot. And that's exactly what an anchor point is. An anchor point is a point on the screen which anchors it to the screen. It is the point by which all of this movement is based around. If you do the rotation, it rotates around the anchor point, right? So notice how the anchor point never moves. It's just everything else around it moves. So whenever you want to create scale animations and cool things like this, the first thing you need to make sure is that your anchor point is still and correct. And so that's the first thing we're going to need to make sure once we drag in our transform effects and when we create like text animations. One thing to also keep in mind is this is all going to be a lot easier in After Effects, so just keep that in mind. We're just doing this so that we can practice how to do it in Premiere Pro, but we're going to be able to do it in a much better way inside of After Effects in the future. So with this being said, what happens when you change your anchor point? Well, your anchor point's located down over here. It's got X and Y values. And if you change your anchor point, your text moves according to it, right? And if I place my anchor point, let's say on the top over here, and I scale it down, all of a sudden my scene is now scaling and originating from my anchor point once again. If I reset my anchor point and now I place it down over here in the middle of the text, all of a sudden when I scale down and up, the text scales down and up. So we'll be teaching you guys how you can use your anchor point to create some cool animations. It is just something to keep out and keep in the back of your mind. Whenever you're creating animations, the place where you want the movement to originate from is always going to be the anchor point. So if you ever run into a situation where you as an editor make an animation and you find that you've made a rotation or a scale and it's generating from the wrong position, always remember that that is your anchor point and you should probably go and change your anchor point. So with this being said, let's start by creating our scale in animation. We're going to add in our transform effect because we're going to be animating our scale. Let's go ahead and start by dragging in a transform effect on the graphic layer, and you're going to see it down here. If you notice, our transform effect also has an anchor point. So check this out. The first animation we're going to be making is the actual text scaling from small to big. It's just going to be scaling up like this and appearing. And this is a quick and simple minimal text animation. So let me show you guys how to make it. It's going to be very simple. It's going to be one keyframe that starts the text at something like 0 or 50 at a very small scale. And then it's going to be a second keyframe that brings the text up to 100 of scale. And then we just need to do the velocity in between them so that it starts quick and then slows down. And we're going to have the text pop up like this and slow down. And it's going to look super cool. I'm going to quickly do this on a different shape layer just to explain this to you guys. So let me quickly draw out a shape layer here and then just move the shape layer here. The effect that we are talking about is when we add the transform effect like this and we keyframe the scale. Okay, we move our playhead forward and we keyframe the scale again. We're going to have the scale start at 50 and end at 100. And then we start the scale at the beginning. So it just starts and pops out like this. Okay, and we're just going to bring this a bit closer. So it's just all done a lot quicker. So the text pops out like that. And then we're going to bring our velocity down and drag our slider down and all the way back so that we have a spike in animation, just as we mentioned, right? Quick start and slow end. And there we go. We get this kind of smooth pop out animation. And this is a very clean text animation. So usually it would be around this long, like this. Yeah. So you can imagine if this was text, it would look really, really clean. One more thing I want to teach you guys to add is this is a quick trick inside of Premiere Pro. If you go down to your shutter angle inside of your transform effect, the shutter angle is how much motion blur you want. And the more you raise this, is the more it allows for motion blur. And if you raise this, you can raise it all the way up to 360. So if you left it up at 360, check out how much cool motion blur you get. Like notice, you see that motion blur over here on the edges? That looks super, super high quality, right? And if I change it back down to 0, you can see it goes away. So make sure you put that at 360 and check out just how much better this looks. It's a small attention to detail, but it makes things look super, super good. So whenever you want to make movement animations in Premiere Pro, you want to make them look really good, increase that shutter angle, okay? So let's go ahead and create a scale in animation over here. So let's add in our transform effect just as we did before, and let's start doing with the scale. But wait a moment, when we scale it down, it doesn't scale from the center of the text, it's scaling from the center of the screen. So what's the problem here? The problem is that we've added our text to a graphic layer, and the graphic layer takes up the entire screen. So the graphic layer is this whole screen, and the anchor point of the graphic layer is up here, right? So the issue is that our text is down here, but the anchor point's up here. So there are a few fixes that we could do. Number one is we could place the anchor points on the text, add the animation, and then change the position of the text. Number two, we could change just make sure that when you move the text to your graphic layer, make sure that the text is at the center of the screen. But how can we fix this right now? How would you do this in a real life situation? If you did all the following steps and you got over to this point right now, how would you just make sure that the anchor point is correct? Well, let me show you guys exactly how you could do this. If you change the scale of this, you notice it's not scaling from the middle. As soon as I move the anchor point of my transform effect, notice there's two anchor points now. There's an anchor point to the transform effect, and there's an anchor point to the text style. The anchor point of the transform effect, if I move the anchor point down here, it's at the center of the screen, and I do the scale, it's still not scaling from the anchor point of the transform effect. It's still scaling from the anchor point of the graphic layer. So for that reason, the most important thing is the anchor point of the graphic layer, right? So all you have to do is just whenever you want to create a text animation, you have to bring that anchor point up. And you just have to make sure that your text is up top. Now here's the problem. We now understand why the anchor point needs to be at the middle and why we can't use the transform anchor point. Because if we do it with the graphic layer anchor point and we do the scale, it works, right? It scales in from the center. But if we do it with the transform effect, and the transform effect anchor point, as you guys can see, it is over here on the text, it doesn't scale in from the center because it doesn't care. The problem is when we do this anchor point over here and we want to save this animation as a preset, we're only saving the transform effect. So we're not saving the vector motion. So we're actually not saving the anchor point as part of the preset. And for that reason, the simplest fix is to change the anchor point of the transform effect so that the text aligns with the anchor point of the graphic layer. And it is as simple as that. Because now if I change the scale of this, it can only change from the anchor point of the graphic layer. Notice what we just did? Because we're going to be saving our transform effect, I would rather change variables inside of the transform effect so that when we save it as a preset and apply it to other text, it's going to apply to the rest of our text, which is in the same scenario like this. So all we got to do is move that anchor point down so that the text aligns with the center, and then now we can do our animation, and finally we'll be able to move it back down to the bottom. So with this being said, let's now create the animation, and then we'll worry about the rest of it later on. So for the animation, all you have to do is keyframe the scale, bring that keyframe to the back, and then change the scale, and then just keyframe it one more time. So we have two keyframes, one for 100 and the other for 100. We're going to go to the first keyframe and set this one to 50, like this, okay? And then we're just going to select both of them, and then we're going to click down on here to open up our velocity graph, and we're going to do our spike. So we're going to bring this bad boy down, and we're going to have it start quick and then slow down at the end like this. I'm also just going to bring this thing back a little bit like that, and then this is, we have a nice this is style. And then the final thing that we want to do is increase that shutter angle all the way up so that we get some really good motion blur in the beginning. This is a sample. So notice how cool that text animation looks. Now there's a few things which you could change now. If you change the start of it to something smaller like 0, you're going to have a bigger scale in animation, which also looks pretty interesting. If you change the start of it to something higher like 80, you're going to have a more subtle animation. Okay, which both of them are interesting. The more subtle is always going to look better. So I like to go with something in between, which is 50, which is this is super good. But now with that being said, now our text is in the middle of the screen. Now what do we do? Now it's very, very simple. All we have to do is just move the position of the text to the bottom. And I believe that's not going to mess up anything. Why? Why doesn't it mess up anything? Because what we're doing now is we're moving the position of our transform effect to the bottom. So we're actually moving the position of the anchor point of the transform effect of the graphic layer down to the bottom over here. So you notice how it's moving with the anchor point. If I move the position of my thing over here, it doesn't move with your anchor point. So now if I do the animation, it looks weird, right? So if I move my vector motion position, it doesn't move the anchor point with it. But if I move my transform effect, it moves its anchor point with it. Here it is. There we go. Click on the transform effect. It moves the anchor point of the transform effect with it, which means if I put it down here where it was supposed to be, now the animation looks nice and simple. And I can save this as a preset because I haven't changed a single thing about the vector motion, right? I haven't changed a single thing about the vector motion. All I've changed is the transform effect. And with that being said, guys, that is how you create the first text style. How do we save it as a preset? If we are happy with the length and the speed of the animation, if you guys want to make it slower, you just extend this keyframe back. This is a sample video. If you want to make it faster, you bring this thing forward. This is a sample. Now, the thing to just keep in mind is you're going to be applying this to all kinds of animations. So just make sure that the sizing of the animation and the scale of it all works really well. Once we are happy with this animation, we can just right click our transform effect and we're just going to call it text scale in animation. Okay, like so. And check this out. So since we saved the preset of the transform effect and all of the variables that we changed are inside the transform effect, we can basically select all of these here because we're not going to be changing anything except the transform effect. Go down to our presets and then go over to our text scale in animation like that and apply it on, and check this out. This is a sample video. Sample video is where I speak and I take a few pauses. Sometimes I might even say important things like this. Other times I'm probably going to say something absolutely useless. There we go. That is our first text style. Now I'm going to Control Z and undo. But by the way, just to quickly explain this, the reason this works is because, as I mentioned, this is our text scale in animation and all of the properties which we changed are inside the preset. We haven't added on any added properties. We didn't change any new things. And you guys noticed when I saved it as a preset, I saved it as scale. So it's going to vary depending on the scale of the clip. So if we bring this clip down and then we delete this, and then we added this thing in, all of a sudden it's going to be a bit smaller, right? Because it's not going to change according to the scale of the clip, which is a very good thing to do. So make sure that you change it according to the scale of the clip. But with that being said, once you have changed all your variables under your transform effect only, and you save that as a preset, you're good to go. If you guys are struggling with this, feel free to rewatch this section a few more times until you fully grasp what exactly is happening, okay? Now, let's go ahead and undo all of this just so that we don't have any sample video on this. And let's go ahead and create our second text animation. So our second text animation over here is a simple pop-up. So let me quickly show this to you guys with a shape layer. So let's say I've got a shape like this. Oh, whoops, I added this inside of the graphic layer, sorry. Okay, so let's say I've got a simple shape like this. I'm going to add in the transform effect, and the simple pop-up fade in is very simple. You just keyframe the position and you keyframe the opacity. That's all you do. Then you move the position forward and you move the opacity forward. So your second keyframes are here. And this shows Premiere that your current opacity and position's over here. And you just have it start at a lower place with 0 opacity. And when you do this, it just looks like a pop-up like this. And then if you make this position a way faster animation, boom, you get a very clean and minimal pop-up. And this just looks super, super clean. This is one of my favorite effects to use to this day, and I just think it looks very, very high quality. And you can make it even stronger by going back to the first keyframe and moving it down even more. So you get a even harsher pop-up like that. And it looks super, super interesting. So let me go ahead and explain this to you guys and break it down to you and apply it to our second text over here. So this is our second text. Let's go ahead and add in the transform effect like so. And let's go ahead and do the same thing with the anchor point. Remember, the anchor point is the most important part. Actually, for this one, for this animation, since we don't be doing any scale or anything, we're going to be changing the position only. We actually won't be needing the anchor point, so don't even worry about that too much. But just for the sake of it, why not change it, right? So let's move it up here, and then let's just move its position down over to here. This way we have our anchor point and position. And now check this out. All that we're going to do is create our pop-up fade in. So we're going to start with our position. We want the position to pop up from the bottom to the top. So we keyframe the current position, and then we're going to move it back and then just add another keyframe. So now we have 2 keyframes for the position, right? Our second one is for the current position, and our first one is just the current position. The first one, we're just going to move it down a little bit like this. Don't move it down too much. We're going to get this pop-up. I'm going to extend it a little bit more so we have a slower pop-up. Now we're going to select both of them and go into our velocity. We're going to drag our slider down and start quick and end slow like this. This is a sample. I'll make sure it starts really quick and then ends slow. This is just like this. I think that's way too quick, so we're just gonna extend this a little bit more. This is a sample, and there we go. This is a sample. I think this pop-up looks really good. Just make sure to increase this all the way so we get the motion blur as well. This is awesome. And then the final part is we're going to keyframe our opacity. And this is a keyframe at opacity 100, so we're gonna move this forward. Then we're gonna add another keyframe here, and we're gonna start it at 0. So it starts at 0, and then goes all the way up to 100. This is a sample, and there we go. This is a sample. Now our text moves way too much, so I'm going to bring it up a little. This is the way I'm doing this, by the way, is the reason you can't see it is just because right now the opacity is at 0, but I'm just kind of like alternating its position. I don't want it to start down here. I also don't want to start at the top. I want it to start somewhere around here. This is just a simple animation like that. Let's have it go. This is a sample. This is a sample, and this is a very simple and basic pop-up animation, which just works every time. This looks super minimal and super high quality. I personally really like it. And I'm just gonna right click and save the transform effect as a pop-up text animation like this. And now, since everything is only applied to the transform effect and we made sure not to apply any other effects to anything else inside the clip, we can select all of these, go over to our presets, go over to our, where is it, text. Pop-up text animation, and then just apply it to all of these and check out what this would look like in a video. This is a sample video. Sample video is where I speak and I take a few pauses. Sometimes I might even say important things like this. Other times I'm probably going to say something absolutely useless. And with this being said, guys, I think this just looks a lot better. And you've got now 2 text animations which you guys can use freely based on whatever kind of project you have. So if you guys have some complex projects with entertaining, engaging videos, then you can use the scale-in animation. If you guys have some basic projects with just, something minimal, something like a business video, and you're trying to make it look as high quality as possible, you can use your text pop-up animation. But with this being said, guys, you now know how to create your transcription subtitles, how to create a text style, and how to create your text animation. And as I said, this is just the basics. We're going to be diving into so much more inside of After Effects, so don't you even worry about it. But with this being said, there is one final thing I want to cover, which is called special effects. And the special effects are drop shadows and glows and how we can make our text just look a lot better. So with this being said, guys, I want to see you in the next course where I'm going to be diving into the special effects, which you can be adding things like glows to your text to make them look a lot better. So I'll see you guys in the next course in which we're going to be covering glows and drop shadows.